Ozzy Osbourne, founding father of British heavy metal, the frontman for Black Sabbath, and a reality TV luminary, has died after a years-long struggle.
For more than 50 years, Ozzy Osbourne defied every prediction, surviving overdoses, accidents, and health scares with a grin and a growl. However, when he finally passed away in July of 2025, fans expected the usual headlines and tributes. But then, something unexpected happened. Behind the locked doors of his private garage, closed off for decades, a hidden world emerged. What was found there wasn't just surprising, it was downright baffling. These discoveries revealed a side of John Michael Osbourne, revealing a man who was more complex, forward-thinking, and brilliantly bizarre than his public persona ever let on. Let's get into the details. The first discovery. As Ozzy Osbourne's body began to betray him in his final years, his spirit never gave in. He had Parkinson's, yes. He had other health problems too, but he wasn't sitting still, not even close. He kept making music. He kept talking about tours he desperately wanted to finish. And then, almost out of nowhere, he did something no one saw coming. He turned into a sharp, risk-taking businessman. Not in a typical celebrity way either. This was Ozzy we're talking about. His version of business was as wild and unpredictable as he was. In the months leading up to his death, Ozzy launched a string of bold, quirky business ventures that no one expected from a rock legend in his 70s. Fans were getting ready to celebrate his decades of music, looking back at the wild man of metal, the Prince of Darkness. No one realized they were also quietly preparing to say goodbye. When Ozzy passed away on July 22, 2025, the news hit like a thunderclap. The world paused. Tributes poured in from every corner of the globe. Rock stars, actors, politicians, and fans from every generation. Everyone had a story, a song, or a moment they shared with Ozzy in some way. But after the first wave of grief passed, something else began to rise. Curiosity, not just about his music, but about what he left behind. And that curiosity led straight to one very unexpected place: his garage. But this wasn't the stereotypical cluttered garage of a retired rock star. There were no beer cans, no forgotten guitars gathering dust, and definitely no chaos. What they found instead was something completely different, almost eerie in its organization. Shelves are neatly labeled, bins sorted, climate-controlled storage units are humming quietly. Everything seemed intentional, almost curated, as if Ozzy had quietly spent his final years putting his house in order, his way. Among the first surprises were stacks of product mock-ups, sealed shipping boxes, and handwritten notes scrawled in that famously shaky handwriting. What no one had really grasped until then was just how serious Ozzy had become about business in his later years. This wasn't some casual side hustle. This was a full-on operation. And the first major clue? Makeup. Yes, makeup. Buried among the boxes was the full product line from his collaboration with Jolie Beauty, a small but fierce cosmetics brand based in his hometown of Birmingham. It was a limited edition launch, and it was pure Ozzy. The palettes were shaped like bats, the mirrors looked like tiny coffins, and the eyeshadow shades had names that sounded like they came straight from one of his albums: Crazy Train, Iron Lungs, Zombie Stomp. What made it even more touching was that Ozzy didn't choose a big international brand to work with. He partnered with a local company, something that spoke volumes about how much he still cared about his roots. The CEO of Jolie Beauty was quoted saying she was honored completely stunned even, that Ozzy wanted to work with them. According to her, Ozzy wasn't just a face for the brand. He was involved. He gave feedback on packaging. He joked about lipstick colors. He even insisted that every product reflect a little madness. That kind of hands-on creativity, no one expected it, but it suddenly made sense. Ozzy, even in his last years, wasn't slowing down. He was evolving. And this makeup line wasn't the only venture. Investigators and family members would go on to find early prototypes of Ozzy-themed home goods, custom-scented candles called Bat Blood, and a small batch hot sauce branded Hell's Tongue. Each one had Ozzy's fingerprints on it, dark, theatrical, and surprisingly well thought out. They weren't just slapping his name on things, they were building something, a legacy that extended beyond music. What made this discovery so powerful wasn't just that Ozzy had created these things, but when he did it. While battling disease, while knowing his time might be short, he didn't wallow in fear or fade into the background. Instead, he threw himself into creativity on his terms. These early finds inside the garage changed how people saw his final chapter. However, the garage still had more to reveal. Because right beyond the stacks of makeup kits and hot sauce bottles was something even more personal. The wardrobe of a madman. This is a private, climate-controlled museum built to preserve the very fabric of his chaos. Every piece inside it carries the scent of sweat, fire, and wild energy. These weren't just costumes, they were weapons of performance, tools that helped create the legend of Ozzy Osbourne on stage. At first glance, it might look like a sea of black, but dig a little deeper, and you'll find stories stitched into every sleeve, every button, every rip and tear. One standout is a strange yet unforgettable black mesh coat. Most people wouldn't give mesh a second thought, but Ozzy did. The coat was custom-made for a reason that perfectly fits his character. During his solo shows, especially in the late 1980s and early 1990s, Ozzy had this wild habit. He'd grab a bucket of water and dump it over himself and the front rows. The crowd loved it. But normal leather or heavy fabric, it would soak up the water and weigh him down. The mesh let the water pass right through without dragging him. It's a small detail, but it says a lot. Even in the madness, there was planning. Today, that piece alone could be worth more than $10,000, and not just because it's rare, but because it was part of his life ritual. But there's one jacket that outshines the rest. A black long-tail coat from his Retirement Sucks tour in the early 2000s. It's loud, it's dramatic, it's covered in graffiti-style paint, and in bold silver letters across the back are the words, "Retirement Sucks." The irony is sharp. This was a man who couldn't stop performing even when his health told him to slow down. This jacket wasn't just part of the show. It was his personal war cry. Even better, Ozzy signed it. His bold, scratchy signature runs across the inside lining, along with the date of one of his final shows on that tour. Auction houses believe it could go for more than $20,000, easily. The deeper you go, the more it feels like you're walking through a living timeline. From the raw, black leather-heavy days of Black Sabbath to the glam, gothic flair of his solo career, each piece marks a chapter. Red crystal crosses on torn shirts from Ozfest, tattered shirts with handwritten notes, and even a few t-shirts with political and personal messages. One of them boldly says, "Ban trophy hunting," showing Ozzy's unexpected passion for animal rights. These clothes weren't just worn, they witnessed history. Each outfit, each button, each stain, they all tell a piece of the story. They've seen roaring crowds, pyrotechnics, blood, real and fake, tears, and triumph. The paper trail of a legend. If Ozzy's clothes showed who he was under the stage lights, the next room told a quieter but just as powerful story, one written on paper. Behind a reinforced fireproof door, tucked into locked drawers and safes, was something you wouldn't expect in a rock star's garage. An archive. A real, carefully preserved, paper-based archive. This was where the noise faded and the handwriting spoke. At first glance, it looked like typical memorabilia, signed posters, concert tickets, and tour passes. But then, the deeper you looked, the more personal it got. And at the center of it all was something that made even seasoned collectors pause. It was a first pressing of Blizzard of Oz, Ozzy's debut solo album, released in 1980. But this copy was different. It was signed not just by Ozzy, but also by the full lineup that recorded it, including the legendary guitarist Randy Rhoads. This wasn't just a collector's item, it was a comeback story pressed onto vinyl. After being fired from Black Sabbath, many thought Ozzy was finished. But Blizzard of Oz proved them wrong in the loudest way possible. With tracks like Crazy Train and Mr. Crowley, Ozzy didn't just return, he redefined metal entirely. Holding that signed album was like holding the blueprint of a second chance. Experts believe that this one record alone could fetch more than $5,000, but its emotional value? That's priceless. And that was only the beginning. Inside old file boxes were handwritten lyric drafts, pages torn from notebooks, full of scratched-out lines and messy scribbles, like a peek into Ozzy's brain during those chaotic, creative moments. Some songs changed drastically from draft to release. You could see where he'd wrestled with lines, swapped out words, and searched for just the right mix of beauty and brutality. Then there were the tour itineraries, some dating back to the 1970s. Yellowed papers with exact show dates, bus routes, and hotel bookings. Some had notes in the margins like, "Ask Sharon about lights," or "Randy needs new pedals." It wasn't glamorous, but it was real. You could almost feel the exhaustion between cities and shows. These weren't the screams and fire of his concerts, they were the quiet grind behind them. Tucked in among these documents were fan letters, some unopened, others neatly stacked. There were contracts, too, deals that shaped Ozfest, licensing papers for products, and early agreements that hinted at just how involved Ozzy had become in his business affairs later in life. And then, just when you thought you'd seen it all, there was one item, buried at the very back of a drawer, that didn't quite belong to Ozzy at all. The Ghost in the Machine. This one was tucked carefully inside a custom black flight case, lined with worn velvet, almost like it hadn't been touched in years. The tag on the outside simply read, RR. Inside was a 1974 Gibson Les Paul Custom. And the second they saw it, jaws dropped. Why? Because this guitar wasn't just linked to Ozzy. It had belonged to Randy Rhoads. Now, if you know anything about rock history, you understand how massive this is. Randy Rhoads wasn't just a bandmate. He was the young guitar prodigy who helped bring Ozzy back to life musically after being fired from Black Sabbath. Their creative bond gave birth to the legendary solo albums Blizzard of Oz and Diary of a Madman. Randy's style was explosive but graceful. He brought classical flair to heavy metal, which was unheard of back then. He helped redefine the genre. But in March of 1982, everything changed. Randy died in a tragic plane crash at just 25 years old. It broke Ozzy in a way few people understood. He was never the same after losing him. Their time together was short, but the connection they had was deep and personal. This Gibson Les Paul was not the white one Randy was most famously seen with on stage, but it had its own legacy. This black Les Paul was used during his Quiet Riot days, before he joined Ozzy. You can actually spot it in old photos, and even on the back cover of Quiet Riot's debut album in the late 1970s. For collectors, this is the kind of item that doesn't just show up. It's the kind of piece people talk about in whispers. A guitar like this, played by Randy Rhoads himself, could easily sell for over $100,000, but for Ozzy, it clearly meant more than money. The big question is, how did Ozzy get it? The answer? Still a mystery. His family has chosen to keep that part private, but longtime fans have always heard rumors, stories that Ozzy quietly acquired the guitar years after Randy's passing, maybe from a former roadie, maybe through one of Randy's relatives. But he never displayed it. He never showed it off. He kept it stored, quietly, privately, like a sacred artifact, a personal tribute. And now, its presence in his estate changes everything. It speaks louder than any press release ever could. This was Ozzy's way of keeping Randy close, his silent way of saying thank you. A quiet ghost, hidden in the shadows of all the madness and noise. A six-stringed reminder of what was lost too soon. And as emotional as that discovery was, it wasn't the last. There was one more twist. The shocking final secret. After all the stories, the memorabilia, the rare guitars, and the handwritten lyrics, you might think you've seen it all when it comes to Ozzy Osbourne. But of course, the man who once bit the head off a bat on stage wasn't going to leave quietly. He had one last secret. And it wasn't some hidden guitar or a vault full of unreleased music. It was weirder, much weirder. And in a way, it might have been the most Ozzy thing ever. This final twist wasn't hidden in a locked safe or stashed in a forgotten drawer. Nope, Ozzy didn't want it hidden. He sold it. To the public, to fans, and to anyone willing to pay for something so strange that it made people ask, is he serious? And that's what made it so brilliant. In the months leading up to his death, Ozzy Osbourne teamed up with Liquid Death, the edgy canned water brand known for outrageous marketing and over-the-top collaborations. But this wasn't just another celebrity endorsement. This was something completely different. They created a product so bizarre that it blurred the line between rock memorabilia and science fiction. A limited edition pack of 10 iced tea cans, each one crushed, each one hand-signed by Ozzy himself, and each one said to contain a trace amount of his DNA. The company claimed that Ozzy had personally drunk from each can. Then the cans were crushed, sealed, and offered up to fans in what was jokingly billed as an opportunity to clone the Prince of Darkness in the future. It was part gothic art, part practical joke, and part real marketing gold. The cans were not meant to be drunk. They were sold purely as collectibles. Souvenirs with a sense of humor only Ozzy could pull off. The pack was priced at $450, and it didn't take long for all 10 to sell out. In fact, they vanished almost instantly after the release was announced. Fans didn't just see it as a keepsake. They saw it as a last laugh from a man who'd made a career out of doing the unexpected. The press couldn't get enough of it. The idea that Ozzy's saliva was now part of music history, it was gross, it was hilarious, it was kind of genius. And the kicker? Rumors swirled that a few unsold cans might still exist, either in Liquid Death's vault or in Ozzy's own garage. That tiny chance of discovering an untouched stash of these DNA cans became the final dream for hardcore collectors. Because this wasn't just a signed item, This wasn't just merch. This was Ozzy himself, in a crushed aluminum can, ready to confuse scientists 100 years from now. Some people thought it was a joke. Others saw it as performance art. But if you knew Ozzy, you understood exactly what it was. It was him being him right up until the very end. While the world looked back on his legacy, he was still looking forward, still pushing boundaries, still having fun with the absurdity of fame. And honestly, what better way to say goodbye than by leaving behind something that's part rock history and part mad science experiment? But Ozzy was always more than his stunts. Beyond the headlines and the antics, he was the voice that defined a generation of rock music. As the frontman of Black Sabbath, Ozzy helped create a sound that would eventually become known as heavy metal. But if you asked him, he never quite liked that label. He didn't want to be boxed into one genre. In his own words, Ozzy once said, "When you get pigeonholed with a certain genre, it can be very difficult to do something a bit lighter or an acoustic track or whatever you want to do. Back in the day, it was always just rock music. It's still just rock music." That was classic Ozzy, always doing his own thing, no matter what people expected. And his influence didn't stop at music. With his wife Sharon and their children, Ozzy starred in The Osbournes, the reality TV show that aired in the early 2000s, and completely changed how we think about celebrity families on screen. It was raw, chaotic, hilarious, and weirdly touching. It opened the door for countless celebrity reality shows that followed. Once again, Ozzy had found a way to shape culture without even trying too hard. Then, on the 22nd of July, 2025, surrounded by his loved ones at home in Buckinghamshire, Ozzy Osbourne passed away at the age of 76, just 17 days after his final live performance at the Back to the Beginning farewell concert. He went out the way legends should, with fire in his soul and music still ringing in the air. Fans across the world mourned the loss, but more than anything, they celebrated the man who never stopped being himself. A man who gave us music that defined our youth. A man who laughed at death, mocked labels, and made even a can of iced tea into a rock artifact. From the stage to reality TV to DNA-infused collectibles, Ozzy Osbourne left behind a legacy that no one could ever replicate, even if science someday tries. He may be gone, but like the marketing once joked, with just a little help from future technology, maybe we haven't heard the last of him after all. Because Ozzy didn't just leave us memories, he left us pieces of himself. What do you think is the most surprising part of Ozzy's legacy? The priceless Randy Rhoads guitar, the iconic stage jackets, or the bizarre DNA-infused tea cans? Let us know in the comments. Thanks for watching, fam. If you enjoyed this video, be sure to like and subscribe to our channel. While you're still here, check out the next video that pops up on your screen.